Hello, welcome to Story Hour with Miss Barbara. This is part 2 of the story of Raggylug and his mother, Molly Cottontail. In part 1, we met Raggy and his mother and saw how Rag had his first encounter with a snake and got his nickname through a snake bite on his ear. In this part, we will follow Rag's further training with his mom, Molly Cottontail. Old Oliphant'sswamp was a rough, brambly tract of second-growth woods, with a marshy pond and a stream through the middle. A few rugged remnants of the old forest still stood in it, and a few of the older trunks were lying about as dead logs in the brushwood. The land about the pond was of that willow-grown, sedgy kind that cats and horses avoid, but that cattle do not fear. The drier zones were overgrown with briars and young trees. The outermost belt of all, that next the fields, was of thrifty, gummy-trunked young pines, whose living needles in air and dead ones on earth offer so delicious an odor to the nostrils of the passerby, and so deadly a breath to those seedlings that would compete with them for the worthless waste they grow on. All around, for a long way, were smooth fields, and the only wild tracks that ever crossed those fields were those of a thoroughly bad and unscrupulous fox that lived only too near. The chief indwellers of the swamp were Molly and Rag. Their nearest neighbors were far away, and their nearest kin were dead. This was their home, and here they lived together, and here Rag received the training that made him a success in life. Molly was a good little mother and gave him a careful upbringing. The first thing he learned was to lie low and say nothing. His adventure with the snake taught him the wisdom of this. Rag never forgot that lesson here. And afterward, he always did as he was told, and it made the other things come more easily. The second lesson he learned was to freeze. It grows out of the first, and Rag was taught it as soon as he could run. Freezing is simply doing nothing, turning into a statue. As soon as he finds a foe near, no matter what he is doing, a well-trained cottontail keeps just as he is and stops all movement. For the creatures of the woods are of the same color as the things in the woods and catch the eye only while moving. So, when enemies chance together, the one who first sees the other can keep himself unseen by freezing, and thus having all the advantage of choosing the time for attack or escape. Only those who live in the woods know the importance of this. Every wild creature and every hunter must learn it. All learn it to do it well. But none of them can beat Molly Cottontail in the doing. Rag's mother taught him this trick by example. When the white cotton cushion Rag's mother sat on went bobbing away through the woods, of course, Rag did his hardest to keep up. But when Molly stopped and froze, the natural wish to copy made him do the same. But the best lesson of all that Rag learned from his mother was the secret of the briar brush. It is a very old secret now, and to make it plain, you must first hear why the briar brush quarreled with the beasts. Long ago, the roses used to grow on bushes that had no thorns. But the squirrels and mice used to climb after them. The cattle used to knock them off with their horns. The possum would twitch them off with his long tail, and the deer, with his sharp hoofs, would break them down. So the briar bush armed itself with spikes to protect its roses and declared eternal war on all creatures that climbed trees or had horns or hoofs or long tails. This left the briar brush at peace with none but Molly Cottontail, who could not climb, was hornless, hoofless, and had scarcely any tail at all. In truth, the Cottontail had never harmed a briar rose. And having now so many enemies, the rose took the rabbit into a special friendship. And when dangers were threatening poor Bunny, he flies to the nearest briar brush, certain that it is ready with 1,000,000 keen and poisoned daggers to defend him. So the secret that Rag learned from his mother was, the briar brush is your best friend. Much of the time that season was spent in learning the lay of the land and the bramble and briar mazes. And Rag learned them so well that he could go all around the swamp by 2 different ways and never leave the friendly briars at any place for more than 5 hops. It is not long since the foes of the Cottontails were disgusted to find that man had brought a new kind of bramble and planted it in long lines throughout the country. It was so strong that no creatures could break it down, and so sharp that the toughest skin was torn by it. Each year there was more of it, and each year it became more a serious matter to the wild creatures. But Molly Cottontail had no fear of it. She was not brought up in the briars for nothing. Dogs and foxes, cattle and sheep, and even man himself might be torn by those fearful spikes. But Molly understands it and lives and thrives under it. And the further it spreads, the more safe country there is for the Cottontail. And the name of this new and dreaded bramble is the barbed wire fence. So that's part 2 of Raggylug. Let's go on to part 3. Now, Molly had no other children to look after, so Rag had all her care. He was unusually quick and bright, as well as strong, and he had an uncommonly lucky chances. So he got on remarkably well. All the season she kept him busy, learning the tricks of the trail and what to eat and drink, what not to touch. Day by day she worked to train him. Little by little she taught him, putting into his mind hundreds of ideas that her own life or early training had stored in hers, and so equipped him with the knowledge that makes life possible for their kind. Close by her side, in the clover field or the thicket, he would sit and copy her when she wobbled her nose to keep her smeller clear, and he would pull the bite from her mouth or taste her lips to make sure he was getting the same kind of fodder. Still copying her, He learned to comb his ears with his claws and make and to dress his coat and to bite the burrs out of his vest and socks. He learned, too, that nothing but clear dewdrops from the briars was fit for Rabbit to drink, as water which has once touched the earth must surely bear some taint. Thus he began the study of woodcraft, the oldest of all sciences. As soon as Raggylug was big enough to go out on alone, his mother taught him the signal code. Rabbits telegraph each other by thumping on the ground with their hind feet. Along the ground, sound carries far. A thump that at 6 feet up from the earth is not heard more than 20 yards will, near the ground, be heard at least 100 yards. And rabbits have very keen hearing, and so they might hear this same thump at 200 yards. And that would reach from end to end of Oliphant'sswamp. A single thump means look out or freeze. A slow thump means come. A fast thump means danger. And a very fast thump, thump, thump means run for your dear life. At another time, when the weather was fine and the blue jays were quarreling among themselves, a sure sign that there was no dangerous foe about, Rag began a new study. Molly, by flattening her ears, gave the signal to squat. Then she ran far away in the thicket and gave the thumping signal for come. Rag set out at a run to the place, but he could not find Molly. He thumped, but got no reply. Setting carefully about his search, he found her foot scent. And following this strange guide that the beasts all know so well and man does not know at all, he worked out the trail and found her where she was hidden. Thus, he got his first lesson in trailing. And thus it was that the games of hide and seek they played became the schooling for the serious chase of which there was to be so much in his later life. Before that first session of schooling was over, he had learned all the principal tricks by which a rabbit lives, and, in not a few problems, showed himself a veritable genius. He was an adept at tree, dodge, and squat. He could play log jump with wind and balk with backtrack so well that he scarcely needed any other tricks. He had not yet tried it, but he knew just how to play barbed wire, which is a new trick of the brilliant order. He had made a special study of sand, which burns up all scent, and was deeply versed in change off, fence, and double, as well as hole up, which is a trick requiring longer notice. And yet, he never forgot that lie low is the beginning of all wisdom, and briar brush, the only trick that is always safe. He was taught the signs by which to know all his foes, and then the way to baffle them. For hawks, owls, foxes, hounds, curs, minks, weasels, cats, skunks, and coons, and men, each have a different plan of pursuit. And for each and all these evils, he was taught a remedy. And for knowledge of the enemy's approach, he learned to depend first on himself and his mother, and then on the blue jay. "Never neglect the blue jay's warning," said Molly. "He is a mischief maker, a marplot, and a thief all the time, but nothing escapes him. He wouldn't mind harming us, but he cannot, thanks to the briars, and his enemies are ours. So it is well to heed him. If the woodpecker cries a warning, you can trust him. He is honest, but he is a fool beside the jay. And though the blue jay often tells lies for mischief, you are safe to believe him when he brings ill news." The barbed wire tricks take a deal of nerve and the best of legs. It was a long time before Rag even dared to play that game. But as he came to his full powers, it became one of his favorites. "It's fine play for those who can do it," said Molly. "First, you lead off your dog on a straightaway and warm him up by a bit by nearly letting him catch you. Then, keeping just one hop ahead, you lead him at a long slant, full tilt, into a breast-high barbed wire. I've seen many a dog and fox crippled, and one big hound killed outright that way. But I've also seen more than one rabbit lose his life in trying it." Rag early learned that some rabbits never learn at all, that hole up is not such a fine ruse as it seems. It may be the certain safety of a wise rabbit, but soon or late it is a sure death trap for a fool. A young rabbit always thinks of it first. An old rabbit never tries it till all others fail. It means escape from a man or dog, a fox, or a bird of prey. But it means sudden death if the fox is a ferret, mink, skunk, or weasel. So hole up means diving down into their hole in the ground, which is safe only if another animal can't follow you down there. But apparently, ferrets, minks, skunks, and weasels can. So there were but two ground holes in the swamp. One on the sunning bank, which was a dry, sheltered knoll in the south end. It was open and sloping to the sun. And here, on fine days, the cottontails took their sun baths. They stretched out among the fragrant pine needles and wintergreen in odd, cat-like positions, and slowly turned over as though roasting and wishing all sides well done. And they blinked and panted and squirmed as if in dreadful pain, yet this was one of the keenest enjoyments they knew. Just above the brow of the knoll was a large pine stump. Its grotesque roots wriggled out above the yellow sand bank like dragons. And under their protection, a silky old woodchuck had digged a den long ago. But he became sour and ill-tempered as weeks went by, and one day he waited to quarrel with Oliphant's dog instead of going in, so that Molly Cottontail was able to take possession of that den an hour later. This pine root knoll hole was afterward very coolly taken by a self-sufficient young skunk who, with less valor, might have enjoyed greater longevity. For he imagined that even man with a gun would fly from him. Instead of keeping Molly from the den for good, therefore, his reign, like that of a certain Hebrew king, was over in 7 days. The other hole, the fern hole, was in a fern thicket next to the clover field. It was small and damp and useless except as a last retreat. It also was the work of a woodchuck, a well-meaning, friendly neighbor, but a harebrained youngster whose skin, in the form of a whiplash, was now developing higher horsepower in the Oliphant working team. So Oliphant apparently killed him and skinned him and used him to make a whiplash. Simple justice, said the old man, for that hide was raised on stolen feed that the team would have turned into horsepower anyway. So that's how he justified it. The Cottontails were now sole owners of all the holes and did not go near them when they could help it, lest anything like a path should be made that might betray these last retreats to an enemy. There was also the hollow hickory tree, which, though nearly fallen, was still green and had the great advantage of being open at both ends. This had long been the residence of one Lotor, a solitary old coon, whose ostensible calling was frog hunting, and who, like the monks of old, was supposed to abstain from all flesh food. But it was shrewdly suspected that he needed but a chance to indulge in a diet of rabbit, and he would take it. When at last one dark night he was killed while raiding Oliphant's hen house, Molly, so far from feeling a pang of regret, took possession of his cozy nest with a sense of unbounded relief. So that's our story for now, and we will continue it next time. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.